cleanse my guilt and pride. Blood of Christ the crucified. From your hands, your feet, your side. Jesus, I trust in you.
Okay, let me share a couple other things with you. Some people have been asking about the Washington, D.C., which I think is only one leg of this attack. Okay? We have had for many years a scenario where there were at least 3 places being hit, in some cases more than that. And at one time, not necessarily at the same moment, maybe a slight delay between each. And so I think that that's what's going to happen here. But most recently, people have been asking me, what about the D.C. prophecy that we've heard? Well, I'm going to read a couple of dreams for you here, and then I'll make some comments about that, okay? This is a dream given to Sultana in 2007. The year before 9/11, I dreamed of 4 explosions. And I told my husband that the World Trade Center was blown up. And I saw an explosion on the ground. And then I saw the Pentagon explode. That was pretty accurate. That was before 9/11 she had, right? In May of 2004, I was given a dream of Washington, D.C. And what I saw was terrifying. While looking at the top view of D.C., the Lord said, "Look." And as I looked, the whole city began to shake as if it fell flat. In the fall of 2004, I dreamed of D.C. again. This time I saw bodies piled everywhere, and trucks were driving by checking IDs. They were throwing the bodies on the trucks like bales of hay. I also saw in Fairfax people staying in their homes unless government permission by the authorities was given to leave. I saw tanks driving in the city streets with military everywhere, and we were making food for them and giving them drinks. In 2002, my brother dreamed about large caterpillars. They were laying dead all around, and someone cut them open, and inside these creatures were metro buses with people in them. And God told me the interpretation of this dream, that the caterpillars are the metro rail system. In 2005, I dreamed that bombs went off in the metro stations. They looked about 3 or 4 feet long and 8 inches high and packed in something like PVC pipe that the plumbers use. And when it exploded, the blast was minimal, but this yellowish smoke came out of the tunnels. As soon as it was breathed, the lungs began to bubble and blister and bleed. It was like I could see inside of someone's lungs. People were painfully dying everywhere. I saw these bombs go off in various stations, Metro Center, Pentagon, Smithsonian. There were explosions in the north side of the Capitol area as well as the White House area outside the gate. In another part of this dream, Metro had put up these scanning booths to check bags before you could enter. Their security measure would minimize the terrorism if Metro chose to use this system. August the 4th, I dreamed that is the National Prayer Chapel, were in the Hilton Memorial Chapel at a prayer weekend. I knew it was not yet our church building, but I saw our people there with other churches involved. I'm not sure which church fellowships they were. I saw Eugenie as she was taking in the beauty of the building. I saw the Luthers, Carols, my family, and everybody. Then I temporarily left the prayer meeting and saw the top view of all the bridges leading into Washington, D.C., and they exploded. I could see down into the water, and it was awful. Cars fell into the water, and people were burned. At the same time, I saw the metro system explode with bombs with yellowish gases. Then I saw a bomb go off at the base of the Washington Monument, and it broke and fell over on its side. And then I was back at the meeting when I heard, "May I have your attention, please? Please remain calm. Washington has just been attacked." Then I saw people start to panic, and our church members went into prayer mode, getting hold of those who were panicking. Then I saw the police tell people to get into their houses or hotels. They wanted the streets clear. No one was allowed to go outside, or they could be killed. And then I woke up. Well, on August the 5th, I dreamed that we were in the Hilton Memorial, but this time I saw David Wilkerson, and he was praying over Pastor Ray Greenlee. He was praying, "Lord, I commission Pastor Greenlee over this region. Lord, give him a great anointing for your harvest field." Then an announcement came over the speakers. "May I have your attention, please? Washington, D.C. has just been attacked." And then I woke up. Maybe this is a sign of a time period or something. I dreamed of New York and Chicago. I dreamed a second time, and I saw New York City bridges blown up and metro system, and I thought I saw the Statue of Liberty fall over too. I also saw the bridges to Chicago hit and their transportation system as well. Chicago was not attacked at the same time D.C. was. It was slightly delayed. So after D.C., the other attack happened. You remember what we just heard in a previous dream, that after this, what I'm going to call the next 911, that many attacks began to happen in the United States. That was one of the witnesses there. This was just the beginning of many militant Islamic attacks. Okay? So we have a lot of these about D.C. on our site. I just thought I would read this one, but we've got a lot of them, quite a few of them. And some of them were quite in agreement with others. We'll read this one from our brother Amos, in which he saw 3 cities attacked, one of them being D.C. He said, "I saw 3 cities under attack. I saw the relationship of the cities as the stars in a triangle. But I don't know how big the triangle actually was. I know Washington, D.C. was hit the hardest. It was at the top of the triangle there. Right? He's showing us here a picture of a triangle with a star at the top point, and then a star down to the right, lower, and then a star to the left, a little bit higher. And he said, I know Washington, D.C. was hit the hardest. I don't know the names of the other 2. The top star, I believe, was Washington, D.C., although on a smaller scale, it could have been New York, with the lower one being D.C. The only thing he knows is one of them was D.C. Okay. Then after that, there were very few cars on the highway. There were a few horses and buggies, and some people were in the woods or on horseback. They met in a small country store, and only one person left the area on a mission after getting a mid-1960s truck started, meaning something that could run past the time when an EMP takes out the modern electronic systems in the cars. God will deliver His people. I was delivered from the blast, and I received help from people on the way. I rode in a buggy and was given a ride on a horse in the woods. I was delivered from the wolves in the woods. I was directed to follow the dogs on the path, and they would take me to the place. I was taken to the country roadside store. I had help from an unknown force to get the truck started to go on a mission. I can't get the exact locations on a PC, but can get an area. Check the stars below for approximate relationship. Well, he's got the upper right-hand star is Washington, D.C., the lower star, which is more to the west but very far south, is something else, and then there's one in the west. He says, depending upon the scale of the triangle in relationship to a map, number 1 would be D.C., number 2 could be Atlanta, because we have had quite a few revelations on our site about Atlanta being nuked. And number 3 could be Memphis, Tennessee. Of course, if the triangle's bigger, number 3 would be much further west, right? He didn't know that. I only saw symbolic locations, but I know Washington, D.C. was one of them. And it will happen, but I don't know the time frame. It could be number 1 is New York, and number 2 is Washington, D.C., and number 3 is around Winchester, Virginia. So, he's just, depending on how big this triangle is, it was the way the Lord gave him this revelation, so he actually wouldn't know, what all these cities are. Now, we can, of course, look at quite a few other revelations and figure out a pretty good idea of what cities. He went on to mention some. Obviously, they were riding in old vehicles and horses and buggies because nuclear bombs cause EMP effect and take out the electrical conveniences, right? I think I'll share one more of these, and then I want to get on to answer some questions here concerning the prophecy of about D.C. Here's a couple of interesting ones that were old, and people, I think, considered that they probably didn't come to pass or something. But this is one from Eulay and Charlotte Surbeck back in 2005. And she said, I saw a suspension bridge, and under the water on the pilings or supports of the bridge, I saw men placing large targets. This is probably the Golden Gate Bridge, because he said it was in San Francisco. Further out in the water, I saw submarines aiming at the targets. I then saw a large pier out in the water in another area, and I saw large cargo ships crashing into the pier, more coming ashore, 5 altogether. The cargo ships seemed to be running by remote control. In Montreal, I saw a large suspension bridge near the city blow up. In Atlanta, I saw something going underground like a train or a subway, and I felt that this was showing where the problem would originate. But this is all that I saw. Well, other people have seen the same thing, underground explosions in Atlanta, okay, that came from underneath the city. Dallas, I saw myself away from the city, and I saw someone go underground, and in a while I heard an explosion in the center of the city, and a large group of buildings, many city blocks, blew up from the bottom up. Washington, D.C., I seemed to be in Washington. I have never been there before. I saw the White House in the distance, and then all of a sudden I saw a white flash. I saw a man go into a bunker, and I followed him down there. I didn't see him again. It seemed to be some kind of command center, but everyone was not moving, and whatever the blast was affected everything. And so here's another one, of underground, below ground, around the White House, so on and so forth. And then Chuck Colson, some of you probably remember his dream, which was very similar to Surbeck's dream here. Then came the most devastating picture of all, panic in the streets of Washington, D.C. as a dirty bomb exploded not a quarter of a mile from the Capitol. Huge sections of the city were cordoned off, uninhabitable. Even people with the best protective equipment suffered serious radiation burns. Projections were that the area would be off limits for years. Then came the bombing of the Holland Tunnel, connecting New York and New Jersey. Then the collapse of the pillars of the Golden Gate Bridge. That's the second witness of D.C. and the Golden Gate Bridge. 2 witnesses there. Okay. Let me share this one thing here that we received from Eric. It's a dream he had recently. I had this incredible open vision today. I think the vision might be important. Here it is. I saw a blonde-headed man, young, good-looking, well-dressed, in a white shirt and black pants, perfectly shined black shoes, and a beige fur coat. He went behind President Obama, pulled out a handgun, put it to the back of his head while he was giving a speech. He pulled the trigger, but the gun misfired. Obama wheeled around and jumped the guy even before the Secret Service could. Then the scene changed. The president and his men in a conference room watching a big screen TV, watching the court arraignment of the attempted assassin. I saw a close-up of Obama's face transform into a hideous, raging beast. End of vision. This was my first open vision, and I believe it could be very important. Eric. Well, when you first read something like this, you tend to see it naturally, but the more you meditate on it, sometimes God speaks to you, I think that this is talking about character assassination from the right. That's what I think. I think that's what this guy represents, the right wing. And I think that this court arraignment on the TV represents being tried in the liberal press. The right wing being tried in the liberal press. And Obama's retaliation, I think that is talking about a retaliation on the right from the left. So I think that this is fitting with a lot of the other dreams we've had. I know something is going to change very, very quickly. Like I said, Jeremiah 25, the very first people who were conquered by Babylon when she started her 70 years of dominion. We know that's 7 years of dominion now. But the very first people that were conquered were God's people. And that's in verse 16 and 17 of Jeremiah 25. But also we are told, for lo, I begin to work evil at the city which is called by my name. And should ye be utterly unpunished? Speaking of Babylon. He used Babylon to first judge the people that are called by his name. That's what we're about to see. Now that was at the very beginning of the 70 years. It mentions all the way down through there all the nations that Babylon conquered, which is basically all the Middle East. But at the very beginning, God's people are brought into bondage. Now, when the 70 years began, God's people were brought into bondage. When the 7 years of Jesus, the 3.5 years of Jesus' ministry, and the book of Acts, which represents the second 3.5 years, God's people were in bondage. When Moses came, God's people were in bondage. Looking around you right now, you'd say, well, something isn't quite right. It's not quite parallel because we don't yet see that. So, what do you think is going to happen to suddenly bring God's people into bondage? Matter of fact, I have thought that, wondered that for some time, and I think that over the last few years, the Lord's answered that for me. This has got to happen. It's got to happen pretty quickly. I believe we got a war coming too. And I think that suddenly American Christians are going to find themselves hated by the majority, persecuted by the left and the middle, and thugs, going after God's people to persecute them and get away with it. The kind of things that when the government begins to look the other way and actually sends out their own thugs. That happened in Iran, didn't it? In Iran, the people who were right-wing and against the government were attacked by thugs. Of course, they were working for the government. So, you think it can't happen here? I don't think there's any doubt that it's going to happen here. Why is he going to do this to his people? Let me read a couple of verses to you from chapter 23, why he considered this needed to be done. Verse 28, For thus saith the Lord, Behold, I will deliver thee into the hand of them whom thou hatest, into the hand of them from whom thy soul is alienated. And they shall deal with thee in hatred, and shall take away all thy labor, and shall leave thee naked and bare. And the nakedness of thy whoredoms shall be uncovered, both thy lewdness and thy whoredoms. These things shall be done unto thee, for that thou hast played the harlot after the nations, and because thou art polluted with their idols. See, God is after a pure people, that understand that His kingdom is separate from this world. It ain't a part of the right or the left. But God is going to deliver His apostate people into the hands of those that hate them. He's going to give... Why would God give victory to the far left? They're so much more evil than the far right, right? Everybody thinks, But who is it that God wants to be perfected? He doesn't do things in the world because of who's the best and who's the least. He does things in the world because of His desire to perfect His people. He will use the beast, which is far more corrupt than His people, normally. He will use the beast to crucify His people because they are the ones He wants to perfect. We couldn't imagine why. I've been told so many times, in the past when the Lord has spoken to me, for instance, who He was going to put in as president, and some right-wing Christian would say, "Oh, no, God wouldn't do that," I said, well, you'll just have to wait and see. And, of course, I think in one case it was Bill Clinton, and the Lord did put him in there. And so they just couldn't imagine God would do such a thing. But the fact is, there's nobody that gets in there that God doesn't put in there, according to Romans 13, according to Daniel. So He put him in there. So why is God going to turn this country over to the communists? The very left-wing people that have been so anti-Christ from the very beginning. Because nobody else would bring the Christians to their cross. And that's the important thing here, is that we have to be perfected and ready for the kingdom of God. You had something, Bill?
When you say turning over to the communists, do you mean the American communists, or are you talking?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Because it's more like fascism, isn't it?
Yeah.
Communism is where the state runs the corporations, and in fascism is where the corporations run the state. So
Well, there was even in Hitler's regime, in the beginning there was a war between the right and the left, and of course Hitler wanted to knock out the communists, and so they had their false flag thing of the Reichstag, and they took it out, blamed it on the communists, and got them out of power. Well, that's already happened here. Now we're going back the other way, and these people are going back into power. So, yeah. So, Bill was talking earlier about a false flag incident that he knew about. You want to tell him about that, Bill?
Back in 1967, the 7-day war, or the 6-day war between Israel and Egypt, we had a naval ship off the coast there monitoring what was going on, and it was called the USS Liberty. It was the reason why I have personal knowledge of this, because I was in naval intelligence, and that was a naval intelligence ship monitoring what was going on, and I worked with some of the guys who were on that ship, and it was communications technicians. There were CTAs, CTMs, CTTs, CTRs, CTIs on that ship that were monitoring what was going on, so they could interpret the voice communications. They could monitor the whatever type of communications that the Egyptians were using, or the Israelis, or we were monitoring both sides. And the Americans were looking for an opportunity to enter into that war And so it was planned to have the Israelis attack the USS Liberty, sink it, and then blame it on the Egyptians. But as God, I would say, have it, He didn't allow that ship to be sunk, because otherwise it should have been sunk. They attacked that ship for 2 hours. They attacked it with 50 cal machine guns. They attacked it with napalm. They hit it with a torpedo, and they were even going to attack it. They were going to the Israelis were going to they were flying with helicopters to land their. They were going to make a landing on the ship and then kill the survivors. But they found out that the technicians on board the ship were able to get an antenna going, and they got a message to one of the aircraft carriers that was within flying distance, a SOS out. And so it was too late. The word had got out that they were under attack, and so the Israelis called off the boarding, and they were able to get the ship into port and get it repaired. And during that time, Admiral Kidd went on board a ship as they were going back to port, and told the survivors that to keep their mouths shut. And basically, they covered it all up.
So it was kind of a false flag event between the Israelis and the U.S.
The Israelis and the U.S., yes.
To get America into the war on the side of Israel.
Right. And LBJ and McNamara, who was the Department of Defense at the time, actually, I believe from what I've read about the accounts, it was McNamara who was kind of leading LBJ along, and wanted that ship sunk, and so LBJ went along with it.
Well, you can't trust anybody that's not born from above, right? That's including Christians, folks. You know, there are Christians that claim to be born again, but born from above is to have that word that came down out of heaven in you. That's what born again is. Not just a new spirit, but a new soul, because of having the Word of God living in you. You can't trust anybody in whom Jesus doesn't live, right? Don't matter if they're Christians. It don't matter if they're right-wing conservatives. It doesn't matter. They're really not on your side, you know, and they will do some wicked things.
What can quench my thirsting soul? Purest water, make me whole. Let your streams of mercy flow. Oh Jesus, I trust in you. Though the mountains fall into the sea, though the rivers rise, I still believe. For your mercy stands and your word.
For information and materials and to contribute, go to ubm1.org. Contributions only may be addressed to UBM, P.O. Box 544, Madisonville, Tennessee, 37354.
The shining rays of red and white, Jesus, I trust in you. Oh, Sacred Heart, in you I find mercy seated for